Wow, that was
Freaking,
amazing. What a jingle.
it's amazing, isn't it? It's fantastic. I'm quite proud of myself. So hello, Craig.
Hello.
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 Um, what do people need to know about you?
Well, that's a long list, I think, but in terms of who I am, I'm a
Yes.
home educator. I'm a just the one child. We've always home educated, and I'm involved in home education support locally, and sometimes on Heifer when I am not bombarded by life in general. Um, you
We
may
all
have seen me pop up occasionally.
um, fairly similar, except so home ed for one child, but we have only been doing it since they finished primary school. So we are doing it instead of secondary school. So the other thing people might want to know is that we were the incredibly unhelpful duo on the question time that
Oh,
that were a plague upon Ellen when she was hosting it. And often started the conversation with, "What have you got in your hand?" and other useful questions.
yes, yes. I didn't
Yeah,
prepare anything to put in my hand this time, I'm afraid.
no, no, me neither. Next time, next time. Okay, so anyway, we've decided to come together to have a chat about different aspects of home ed. And tonight we're having a chat about data and home education. Why do you think, Craig, that we need to have a chat about data and home education?
It's something that crops up, not on a infrequent basis. I'd say, a couple of times a week I get tagged maybe for a question around data, and sometimes they're quite similar. Sometimes I get thrown a new one, which is, I have to have a quite a good think about. But yeah, it seems to be something that, and it does traverse a lot of other issues as well. It might be combined in, as another ask that people have had, and so I
Mm.
think and to be honest, Cheryl, it's really important, I think, for people to be aware of this, not even just for home ed, but well, actually thinking about actual home ed, but to teach their children about data rights and things. And I know it sounds really boring, but it's really important in an increasingly data-driven world. It's really important for everyone to know what their rights are and what people are allowed to do and not allowed to do with their data.
We should say, why is it that you get tagged? Is it for laughs? Anything
Well,
about data
I
will
do
tag,
I do try
tag
and
Craig.
provide the jokes, but hopefully I'm helpful as well. Am I do this as a day job, so I home ed part time with my wife. She does the other bit of the week. I do some of the week, so we both work part time, and my day job is um, working with data protection issues. I'm an internationally certified um, information privacy technologist, which means I look at all different ways to safeguard privacy using technology. Um, and I'm also doing a certification in AI governance as well. So I'm full of laughs, me. I don't profess to be an absolute expert. I do know a lot of what I'm talking about, but I always say I'm not infallible. If anyone can challenge me and
Mm.
point out why I'm wrong, I'll happily learn. But I like to, think that I'm helpful with these things that come up. And so I try to be when I'm tagged. Whether
Thanks a
people
lot.
think I am or not might be in a different opinion, but
No, always helpful. So what kind of data are we talking about when we're talking about data and home ed? What kind of data are people going to be concerned about?
well, so when we talk about data protection, it's always personally identifiable data. So it's something that can obviously identify who you are or be combined with another piece of information that could identify you. So it might not have your name in it, but it might be your address. Then when combined with something else might lead people to know who you are. And so in home ed, a lot of the time it is that your data is being shared with local authorities, schools, health, etc. It's being shared to different departments. It's being shared to maybe a family member that you didn't want it to be, um, or the other big one that comes up a lot is getting access to your data, so it being shared back with you. Um,
And the
and so
data, actually, it's not, it's sometimes about ourselves, isn't it? But we're often talking about data about our children, aren't we?
we are, yes, yes. So I'm talking about, yeah, I'm talking about it in a professional sense of it being about the data subject. So um, yeah, so to clarify, like off to start off, I suppose we've got the data subject is the person that the data's about. So obviously that might be a parent in a small sense when it's got it's involving the child's record at school. But on the whole, as you say, it will be about the child. Now, in law, the child owns that data, no matter how old they are.
Okay.
Obviously, they can't exercise the right to access or the right to say, no, I don't want my parent to access that at a certain, before a certain age of maturity. Um, they normally go with Gillick competency, which is about 13, roughly. So around about that age, although in my professional world, I normally go for a little bit younger than that, and then judge it on a case by case basis.
We definitely had questions where someone asked for data about their child, and then maybe the school has come back and said, "Oh, we need your child's permission because of the age
Mm.
that they are." And that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
That
It's
is, yeah, and that actually makes me really happy because that means the school's really
mm,
taking it seriously and paying attention to the rights of that child. And although it might be frustrating for the parent, I do encourage them to see it as a good thing. Their child's data is being safeguarded in the
mm,
correct way by the school, and it's not to purposely block you. It
mm.
is to make sure that the child is happy with you seeing that. The juxtaposition between the way you request it through the
Mm.
GDPR and the way you do it through parental right to access education records is something we can come on to in a bit if you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've been looking at what, and we were asking the admin as well, weren't we, about what are the kind of
We were.
questions that tend to come up, and what do we have to try and answer, and there were three areas, I think. One was data stored by schools, so a lot of our heifer members come and their kids have already been at school. My kids at school, and so data has been collected by the school there. So we've got some questions about that. We also get questions about the data that the LA, the local authority, might request from you or demand from you, and not knowing whether or not you can say no, and then what do they do with that kind of thing. And then there's I think probably a bit of trepidation about what the LA can and can't do with the data once you've given it. So even if you feel like you have to give it, what's the rule there, and what are some of like the safeguards about that? So I think that was the three main areas, isn't it? Those three kind of areas of
They were the definite
concern.
themes that were coming up, and
Mm.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, why don't we start with school then? Okay, so when children are at school, there's all kinds of data collected about them just through the process of being registered and all that kind of stuff. So, what would be the situation if you were to deregister your child, or even I suppose at the end of them finishing school, right? So they finish end of year 6 in primary school. Um, how long would the school keep that child's data after they're no longer a pupil at that school? Are there any rules
So
about
I'm going to be really boring and start with a disclaimer and say hopefully I don't put people off of listening and listening to the advice I give. But a lot of the practice around data protection, a lot of it is interpretive. So a lot of it is using your kind of experience and skills and expertise to look at the law and look at your interpretation of it and doing what you think is the right thing to do in that circumstance, which means you're not always going to get a consistency across authorities, across schools. And that is exactly the answer I'm going to give there is I'm from the research that I have done into this. And again,
that?
I'm happy if people want to point out where they know there is consistency, that would be wonderful. But from the research that I've done in my professional and my home ed kind of career, there is a variety of answers to that question, which isn't really a helpful answer, but it can range, from X number of years to Y number of years, really. You would tend to have it on a school system until it's no longer needed, which is the
Mm.
law that you
Yeah.
only keep the data as long as it's needed.
Mm.
But after that, it should then be transferred to the local authority, and they would have then separate archiving.
Okay, so they don't just delete it, they
Place.
have to transfer
They
it to the local
shouldn't
authority.
just delete it. Absolutely, yeah, because there's they need to keep educational records for a set number of years. I can't remember off the top of my head how long that is,
Okay.
but yeah. So each authority would have their own arrangements for storing that data
I'm
after.
thinking that every school or every organisation, it ought to have a data policy, shouldn't it?
It
So
should do, yeah. You should be
would
able to
that be the
find it
kind of
out.
thing you could go and find on?
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
can ask for the retention policy or
Okay.
procedures. Is what you're looking for. The word is retention in the law. How long is it retained for? How long is it
Okay.
kept?
Cool. All right. Brilliant. Okay. So the answer to that is it depends. But you could try and find that out by looking at the data retention element of a data policy on a
Yeah.
school's website. Okay. Um, so we've got this question already, but I just want to check in. So what happens to the data after I deregister? Oh, and a year later, for example, I want to do an SAR. Right. Okay. What's an SAR
What's
and
an
why
SAR?
might you want to do one?
Well, you might want to do one. And what it is, I will take those in the opposite way.
Okay.
So, what it is a subject access request, which means that you're asking for data about the subject. So the subject is normally, if you're doing it, it's yourself. Otherwise, as we discussed, you can do it on behalf of your child, your young person, if they aren't competent to do it themselves. If they are old enough to do it themselves, it's much easier to get them to ask for it, because the school, as we've said, should come back and say we need their permission to do this. Um, and in my professional world, I deal with young people's data as well on a professional level. I don't just accept a written thing. Normally, I don't. I normally ask to either speak to the young person or get them to kind of contact me directly with some ID and stuff. Obviously, those things can be. There are ways around those things, but I like to be, quite certain that that
Mm.
young person knows what's happening there.
Okay. Okay. So a
But
subject. Yeah. So
go
go
on.
on. Sorry. So why might somebody ask for data from a school?
Well, so
Just a bit
a lot of
nosy.
the time, well, this is the thing. You can do it to be
Mm.
nosy. It is a lot of work for
Mm.
people usually. If a school's got really good processes in place and good systems, it should be easier. It isn't for a lot of schools, and it might surprise people to know that schools use a variety of different systems. There's not one school system that's used by people
Mm.
um, across the board. I've worked in various schools in my previous life, um, and yeah, there's a whole variety of systems in use, and with those come, varying degrees of usability. A lot of the time, these things come down to cost, and so it's really a kind of a lottery to how easy it is for the schools to get that off. So if what I say is if you're after it for interest, maybe try and specify what you're asking
Mm.
for.
Mm.
But yeah, you might be after it because you're wondering about a particular issue.
Uh-huh.
A lot of the time we see the issues coming through to support maybe EHCP applications after someone's deregistered, because some people still like to pursue that, or
Okay.
they're
Yeah.
concerned about a certain incident maybe that
Mm.
has even triggered or tipped the balance into the home ed situation that's occurred, and they want to pursue, that. Um, Other times
Any
it's
things
where,
like marks that they got for things, results of tests, that kind of
do you know
stuff.
what? It's yes, you can do that, but
Mm.
it's a lot less. I see that a lot less in the
Mm.
asks that we get in
Okay.
the group. Than particular issues, or where the school has passed data onto someone,
Mm.
etc. Those are on the whole, the main. I've not actually seen many saying I'd like to see the results of this and that. I think maybe one or two.
Mhm.
Mm.
How does this actually work then? So,
So, how does it work? So, basically, just ask for it. Presuming you've got, the consent, etc., like we've
mm,
just discussed. So, the request itself doesn't have to be in a particular format. By
mhm,
law, it doesn't have to be in a particular format. You're you're not compelled by law again to fill out a form, to fill out a certain information. All it needs to be is a clear indication that you want access to
yeah,
XYZ data. Now, saying that, templates are always good. We've got
mm,
templates in the guides. Read the guides. There's templates in those, and it's a pretty simple process. Make it clear that you're asking for access to data
mm,
through under the rights of subject access
okay.
request, and all of the schools will know what that means.
Can they charge you for doing this?
Um, there is it. It depends. They can't usually is
Right.
the answer. If they feel like it's an excessive request or it's manifestly unfounded,
Mm,
they can even refuse it. So if they think you
right.
are just doing it to cause them work,
Right.
then they can say,
Mhm.
no, we won't provide that. Or we will have to, charge you this. But it's very rare that they can charge for this. So in a general sense, no, they shouldn't be charging you. And, if anyone is saying they'll get charged for it, then I'd be very happy to, talk about that and, support where I can. It doesn't always mean that it will
Mm,
be wrong, but
mm.
on the whole, you're not going to find that you're charged for this.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay, oh, that's cool. Okay, well that's the main things we get asked about
yeah,
with schools. Um, let's move on to the local authority. All right. So I've seen this one happen a few times. So what normally happens, well, not to say normally, often happens, is someone will get contacted by the elective home education team, and they might say, "Oh, we hear you've deregistered and you're home educating, and we'd like to visit you." And the person writes back and says, "Oh no, I prefer to keep all communication in writing. And here's my email address." At which point, what happens if the local authority says, "We need your post address. I need your postal address." Do I
I
have
would.
to give it to them?
Right. So I realise we are asking this and answering this to be helpful. What I would say is I'd be very surprised if you deregistered and they got in contact with you and didn't have your postal address from the school.
Mm,
So I would be shocked if that hadn't been shared. But yeah, it does happen. Or you could have been found out,
mm,
and they got an email from somewhere. But if they haven't got your address, I'm gonna, and this is where the interpretation of the law
mm.
comes in. They need the data. They need data to be able to perform their duties
Yeah,
under law. So they've got a duty under law to find children missing, not receiving a suitable education.
yeah.
So what data do they need to do that? They don't need your postal address to do that. So my interpretation of that would be that actually that's an over collection of data. You
Mhm.
don't need that information. You can, as long as, we're able to provide a written response to your
Mm,
inquiries, you're not going to need that.
mhm.
I think it would require you to work with them even if things went a bit sideways for yourself in terms of actually if they then said that this isn't okay,
Mm.
your provision, if they're judging your provision as not suitable and they move to formal action,
Yeah.
um, I'm pretty sure they would then need your postal address to be able to serve an official notice to your home. I'm not sure legally you could do that by email, but I might be wrong there.
Mm.
I've not looked into that one that much, but I would be surprised if they were happy to keep it at email at that stage. Um,
If just for example, they did contact me and said, "Oh, we need your postal address." could I just write back and say, oh, could you please explain to me why you need to collect that data, as you already have my email address?
Yeah, I think that would be the less argumentative way to do it.
Mm,
It would put people's backs up. I can see that. It would put mine up. Why are you asking for my, why you're already in my life? Why do you
yeah.
want more of me? But yeah, keeping it kind of light and
Mm,
inquisitive rather than confrontational is the
mm,
way I would go to start with. And I know we've got some lovely and some tricky LAs, and the
mm.
trickier ones might be a little bit, hard ball with it. Um,
Naive question. I love to kind of like, oh, please could you explain to me why? I'm trying to understand, and why is it that you need that again? And then they have to put it in writing, don't they?
well, this is it, yeah. And you can ask again, like we just said about
Mm,
the schools at the start, ask for their policies on things. Look,
mm,
look, can I see your policy on,
yeah,
on your data protection policy,
yeah,
and what are you going to do with the information I
mm,
give to you, since we're already talking over email? It
mm,
can be the follow-up question if they're still demanding
yeah,
it, but I think your gentle and very, light inquiry of,
mm,
oh, can you let me know why? Because
yeah.
I'm happy to keep everything in writing over email.
Mm.
Um, and so,
Because
yeah,
we were looking at because we know how to live on a Wednesday evening. We were looking at the EHE guidance
oh,
for,
we love it.
for parents and the local authorities. And how many times did it mention the word data in the parents version?
I think it was it something like zero?
It
Yeah.
was a big fat zero, and I think it was 10 times
Yeah.
for the local authority. So the fact it's not even mentioned, data and data sharing isn't even mentioned in the parents one. I think, I'd even, kind of say, oh, I've been reading my guidance and I don't see anything in there. But okay, cool. Well, another one, and I think this comes from people. I think, yeah, people don't want to aggravate the local authority. But at the
Mm,
same time, they're feeling uncomfortable that they're being asked for something more than they feel is appropriate. I think that's where some of these questions come from. So when a family moves from, so say, from one county to another, they'll move from one local authority to another local authority. Um, so then you can have a scenario where the old local authority is contacting them and saying, "Oh, it's time for you to send me a written response," and you say, "Oh, we're no longer
mm,
in your remit when we've moved," and they start pestering for your new address, um, and even to the point of threatening the parent with
yeah.
identifying them as having a child missing education.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar? What
Yes.
have they got a leg to
Yes.
stand on with that?
Yeah. No, I don't think so, really. And again, they would probably put forward a safeguarding argument about this, but the comeback to that is there's two ways to deal with this as well, because you don't even then have to interact with them anymore, because there's,
Mm,
if we're looking at the law again, which we're doing tonight, um, they have once you have moved out of their area, you're no
mm,
longer under their, they've no longer got a legal duty towards that child
mm.
in so much as determining the suitability of the education, and that is why they're contacting you.
Right.
And so actually they've then not got any of that to do. And so unless there were safeguarding issues before and
Mm,
concerns before, which I think then puts it into a different question.
mm.
But we're assuming there haven't
Yeah.
been, and it's purely the EHE team contacting you about this. If there weren't any safeguarding concerns before, why would there be now, just because
Mm,
you've moved? Because I've seen
mm,
some local authorities say it's about safeguarding,
mm,
which is why I mention it. So I don't really think they have got a leg to stand on if that is the sole reason they're putting up there. I've seen local authorities, back in the early days when the group only had 30,000 members rather than 150 billion, or something. I can't keep up.
152 billion, actually, I
50,
think. Fine.
I always get it wrong. I'm sorry. But back when it was a little bit smaller,
Mm,
I could keep up with a lot of the posts.
yeah.
There was some, one or even two maybe, and where the person had moved abroad from the UK and weren't sure when they were coming back, which is why they
Mm,
were in groups still. Um, they were planning on coming back at some point, but then the local authority was still pestering them to provide them with an address, and then they thought, well, I'm not even in the UK anymore. So it's almost like there's not a box they can tick for some situations. They're not happy to do that.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. So, and I think sometimes they see as moving out of the area as trying to, abscond with your child when you're just, moving house.
Own child.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Child to another county. Oh my gosh. Right. Okay. Well, okay. So that I think we've got that one pretty good. And I suppose the thing to say as well is that, if you're in any doubt, put a post up about this. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think we're pretty good.
Even ask for me.
Oh,
You
even ask for
know,
you.
I
Oh,
know.
that's a
I
request.
feel really special then. That'd be lovely.
Okay. Other data that local authority might request, if you have said, "Oh yes, I'd like it all in writing," they go, "Right, okay, then let's be having it. I want to know if I want to know about the progress of your child, blah blah blah," and that's what we then call a written response. Uh, so it's writing in response to the local authority's inquiries about how the education is being provided, so they can assess whether you're actually in receipt of it or not. So we've got a whole guide on this, on how to write this thing. What happens to that written response? So how long will the EHE team store that response if you send one in?
This again is going to be a ask for their policy on it,
No,
ask for
listen.
how long they do it. I've got there's and again, this is the interpretive nature of this because there's
Mm,
arguments in both camps in my head
mhm,
for this. So some people say they should make a decision on the suitability of the
mm,
education and then delete that report,
yeah.
that response, delete it, delete all of the stuff except
Mm,
for your thing saying yes, this is suitable, or no, it isn't. I
mm,
think if no, it isn't, you probably need to keep it anyway.
yeah.
But yes, it's suitable, delete it. I'm not in that camp fully because
Mhm,
I can see their need in law to keep it because I know they're not meant to monitor,
mm,
but to be able to, if there's any questions that come back about why that decision was made,
yeah.
and I'm thinking about if the young person themselves, say they reach their 20s and they think,
Yes.
do you know what? I didn't learn anything. Mum, I can't get a job. This is
Hmm.
awful. Wasn't someone meant to be like
Mm,
making
hmm.
sure I did? Yes, it's the
Yeah.
local authority. Okay, well, why did you say it was okay then? That
Mm,
I can see why they might need to keep that. And I'm not obviously I'm not saying I think home education is wonderful and if one comes out brilliant, but there is that theoretical possibility that situation might happen.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's not the only one that I can think of as well, but I
Mm,
won't go
mm,
through them all. But in those situations, the local authority would need evidence of why they've made a legal decision.
hmm, hmm.
And so I think that it's probably not going to be a case of just deleting it. I'd be surprised if any of them did that.
Yeah.
Um, I would think it would form part of the education record of
Hmm.
that young person, which, as we discussed, would be transferred from a school to local authority,
Yeah.
or if you've never been to a school, would just form part of the education record of that young person at the local authority.
I'm going off script here, Craig. Sorry. Um, I'm just imagining because it's the child that this is about. So, say they get to the end of being compulsory school age, which I believe is sometime in June after their 16th birthday. Um, they get to that point, and so compulsory school age, all of that stuff has gone. Would they then write to the local authority and say, "Right, I want you to get rid of all the data you hold about me"?
I knew you were going to ask that. Um,
No, I was going to ask that.
I know no, when you started, I didn't know you were going to ask it at the beginning of this,
Oh,
but I knew I could see where it was going.
what
Um,
do you reckon?
I I'm not. I'm going to say I don't think so because I'm pretty sure, and I'm just trying to quickly look in my resources here. So this this might be and come back to this later. But
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that they need to hang on to those
Hmm.
records a
Okay.
set amount of time.
My
Uh,
guess is that if they could justify a reason why it's important for them to keep it in order to do that, fulfill their responsibilities, they could probably get away with it, right? But if
yeah.
there isn't a good reason to hold the data, then they would need to just comply and get rid, yeah?
Yes, exactly. And so they might be able to delete things like telephone numbers, etc.,
Yeah, yeah,
email
yeah.
addresses. If you said, look, please delete all my contact details.
Mm,
Um, but again, they probably wouldn't be able to dispose of things that make up that educational record
yeah.
until that set retention period has ended, because they've already gone through a process of justifying why
Mm,
they're keeping that record for that long. And I can't remember if that's set down in statute or if that's down to individual authority. So statute being law, sorry, it's going to work mode. Um, but yeah, so I'm not going to say I know the answer to that one
okay.
off the top of my head. But it
That's
would
well,
definitely be what you said is they could delete things that they definitely didn't need, like, please delete the pictures of me eating an ice cream that my mum sent in. I don't really, they're not going to need that.
it's made in not no longer wetting the bed.
Yeah,
I'd like it if you didn't
exactly.
have that in there anymore.
Exactly. And, just to clarify, we don't advise you send pictures in.
No, don't
Um,
send pictures. You don't need to tell them about bedwetting.
no, and
Stick to
definitely
the
no
husband
pictures of
have.
bedwetting.
Okay, so yeah, I mean actually that's a good point. That is a really good point. With God, just read the guides on written response, because one of the things with the data um sharing issue is if you're only giving the data that is required, then you can worry less about what happens to that data. And the guides are really good at explaining, this is the maximum of what you need to say. Um, and the other point is, if you don't provide enough information the first time round, it's just an informal inquiry, it's just a request for information, the local authority can come back and ask for some more information. So if you don't give them enough, they will come back and ask for more. So don't overshare in the first place, and then you don't have
This
to
is
worry
this
about
is
it.
a big, big thing that people tend to do. I've got a friend, and I'm not giving anything else away, but they do a written response that is lengthy, and I do say, wow, that's a lot. I think they enjoy writing it. So that's lovely. And we are blessed to be in a currently very easygoing LA anyway. But it is always best to hold stuff back. A lot of my work in my professional life is about data minimization, looking at ways of only recording and keeping and then sharing to the appropriate people that the minimum amount you need to get that job done or to safeguard that young person or whatever.
Yeah.
So always think about that. And I know it's a little bit, it's a little bit wordy, data minimization. It's just like give the minimum away that you need to give away.
Yeah.
This is personal stuff about, like, think of it about giving a piece of your child to that local authority. How much do you want to give them? Give them a
Mm,
fingernail, don't give them a hand.
yeah. Yeah. So please don't send fingernails into the local
No,
authority.
don't do that either. No DNA samples needed yet.
No, no, not required. Okay, right. So they've got all this lovely stuff about your child. What can they then do with it in terms of passing on to someone else? So can the EHE team or the EHCP team, can they share data about your child without asking your permission? By sending it in, have they just assumed you've given your consent for them to
So
share through their work?
it, so some of this gets very complicated very quickly, which isn't helpful to people. But so in general, it depends who we're talking about them sharing it with. So if let's take the local authority sharing it between departments, they're sharing it with the HCP team or the school nurse team, which
Yeah.
is part of a local authority.
nurse team, aren't they? But they're not necessarily school. They're not
They're
school
not school, no.
nurses. They just get
They're
called the
more
school nurse.
paediatric community
Yeah,
nurses, really, and
yeah.
but they're called school nurses in almost every local authority still, and they are all by law. Well, I'm going to backtrack there. I don't know if it's statute law, but they are all part of local authorities now.
Okay.
That
Okay.
that happened in 2015 or something like that. It was a long time ago, but people still don't
You
realise
know, I'm
that they're not
slightly
part.
freaked out that you're able to quote that, but
They're not.
okay.
They're not part of the. I might have got it completely wrong. You just say it with confidence. No one knows. I'm pretty sure. I
Okay.
am happy to
Okay.
be corrected on the date, but they are now part of the local authorities. They're not part of the NHS.
Hmm.
So while they work closely with health services, they're not actually part of them anymore. So
Okay.
if they get information shared to them, they can automatically then legally really share it with other local authority departments. The local authority is the body that holds the data. It's not the individual teams. By law, they're one
Okay, so
entity.
when you give your data, this is really important, I think. When you give your data to the EHE team, it doesn't belong to the EHE team. It belongs to the local authority that the
In
EHE team
it,
works for.
yeah, and again, this you could argue because you've still got the principle of data security and of data minimization. Again, they shouldn't be just giving it to everyone that works at, that Daniel
Evening.
who runs the reception shouldn't be reading his report, and Cliff who works in IT doesn't need
Yeah,
to see it, and whoever.
yeah.
But yeah, in law, the local authority is the body that holds that, and therefore
Okay.
there's a lot looser lines between how they share it internally.
Right.
It doesn't mean you can't challenge some things, but it's a lot harder to do that. So
Can you
in
say
general,
anything at the
they
point
can.
of sending your information in about I would I don't give you permission to share without my consent, or how does that work?
So you can try that, you can do that,
Mm,
but in law, in data protection law, there's no real inferred consent.
okay.
It it's difficult because a
What
lot of
that
websites
means
try and do
actually.
this. So inferred
Consenting.
consent means that you are assuming someone is consented to something by their actions. Now,
Okay.
some websites do, by continuing to browse, you're agreeing to this, that, and the other to happen on your machine.
Mhm.
So that's inferred consent. You can't really do that with data.
Mhm.
People do it, but you're not meant to do it. Consent can only be given if it's informed, which means they've given you all the information you need to know. They've given you the information, and it's set out the minimum that they need to give you. Are things like their legal basis for sharing it, for collecting it and processing it.
Mhm.
Sorry, who they might share it with,
Yeah.
what they're going to do with it, so their purpose. Um, and their retention, how to make complaints. There's a few other things as well that I can't remember off the top of my head, but their legal basis is what we're talking about when we're looking at consent versus things like legitimate interest versus the consent is probably what people most familiar with, but the local authority would be operating under a public task basis. So because they've got a public task, which means that this is getting very technical. So I'm sorry if everyone's switched
Yeah,
off.
I'm looking at my glass of wine, thinking, is now the moment?
We can have a sip of wine. Sometimes makes these things go better, doesn't it? But public task means that they've got a
Yeah.
legal duty to perform, basically.
Okay.
Um, um, to the public is not only used really by local authorities and similar organisations, and that means that they're fulfilling their public duty
Okay.
under law.
So
And so,
basically, if the school nurse contacts me
yeah,
and says, "Oh, your kiddo, I understand your kiddo is this age, and they're elective home educated, and I'm inviting you to, I'm telling you that they're due their such and such immunisation, which they would otherwise get at school. Should I be horrified at this breach of my privacy, or is it? Oh, well, yeah, well, that's standard, isn't it? Because the local authority has got my details about my
The
child.
thing is, so I think this comes on to another something that comes up in group as well, actually, is people being horrified and upset and worried about the data that's been shared.
Mm.
So if you weren't known and that had happened, if you weren't known to the local authority and that's happened, then you probably would be known at some point soon because they're part of the local authority at that, at that stage, and they will probably pass your details on to the EAG team. That's nothing to worry about. It can be annoying. So the data passing on would have happened from health to that school nurse probably, depending on how school have interacted with that service as well, though.
Okay.
Whether you're outraged or not, and as I say, we're coming back to some of the things that come up in group again. That's really up to you how outraged you are. I would encourage you not to be. The worst that's happened is you're now known to the local authority, and that's what happens. Most people do become known at some point. It means you might need to provide a written response to their inquiries. Sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes they leave you alone.
Mhm.
Um, but on the whole, no. And I would say take things like life's hard. For most people at some stage, you don't need to be worrying too much about your child's name being on a letter that went to someone else. To be honest, so sometimes we get in group, oh, they've sent me a letter with someone else's name on it. That's when you're looking at a data breach, which is where data has your rights have been broken. So the right to not have that data shared with people that shouldn't have it.
Yeah.
You've got to look at harm and
Mhm.
what's the harm that's occurred or going
Yeah.
to occur from this. Probably nothing.
Okay.
And even becoming known to local authority, that's not a harm in that's going to be standing up in any court or any kind of jurisdictional authority. So
Just annoying.
it's annoying, and that's it really.
Okay.
Yeah, apart from a few select cases, I would say that the harm is very negligible.
Cool. Okay. If you're worried, you heard it here. Craig said, tag them on your post,
I
and
did.
if you've got any concerns about data, I
You
bet you
might have
can't
been
wait
able
to
to
get one
tell
of
it's
these.
a bit of a special interest of
Yeah,
mine, so I'm
I know.
happy
You
to
can't
talk
wait.
about
You
it.
can't wait.
This can add
Okay,
to
I've got
my CP credits for my recertification. So this is
one
fine.
last
Bring it
question
on.
for you. I
Go
think I've
for
got
it.
one last question for you, which is so where things get even more complicated. So it's not just the parents and the child, but then you sometimes have split partners.
Yeah.
So one parent,
Mhm.
someone with parental responsibility,
Yes.
has written a written response and has supplied information to the local authority about the home ed. Um, what rights does the other parent have, or the other partner, or the person with parental responsibility? What rights do they have to ask for that data? And is it okay for the local authority to go, oh, okay, you've got parental responsibility too. Yes, here you go. Here's the written response that was submitted.
So yeah, so we know that that does happen.
Mm.
Um, it shouldn't happen as a matter of course. It should happen on an individual basis. So in that situation, that parent is unlikely to be exercising their child's right to access that data, which is what you're doing when you request it through an SAR, like we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
You're exercising your child's right. You're acting on
Mm.
their behalf.
Yeah.
It's unlikely that um, that parent is doing that.
Mhm.
Um, they might be, but yeah, it's unlikely that that has happened in that situation. What they would probably rely on, even though they probably, 9 times out of 10 might not know it, is their right of access to the education record of their
Mhm.
child through Section 5 of the Education Regulations 2005. So they that says
I think
that
I'm just going to have a quick sip of wine.
go for it, yeah. Um, that's that gives them the right of access to the education record from a maintained school, um, which is maintained by local authorities. So therefore, you
But
can
not an academy.
no, you can transfer that onto local authority, but not an academy.
Mm, okay.
So I've not been
Sorry,
able
I
to give.
sidetracked you there,
No,
but yeah.
absolutely. If anyone can point it out to me where I can find it, I'm
Mm,
happy to back down on this, but I
mm,
can't find anything in law. And I've looked on the ICO website, which is the Information Commission, which is the independent regulator of data rights, etc. in the UK. I'm on there quite a lot, which is sad, but for work mainly. But only a slight bit for pleasure.
mm,
Um, I can't find anything on there, and they almost explicitly say that the academy it only applies to maintained schools.
right.
That there's no reciprocal right for people to access that record through an academy. Now, most
Interesting.
academies would probably have their own policy on allowing access to that,
Mm,
but from what I can find, there's no law
okay.
that
Mm,
says it might be buried somewhere. So if someone does know it, please enlighten me. I love to be educated.
Jim,
But that's a
totally,
challenge for
totally took
everyone.
you off track there. Sorry. We
No,
had, so we've got parent A, parent B. Parent
yeah,
A sent the written response in. Parent B is like, I want to see that written response, and they request it. And you're saying they might have a right under the Education
they
Act.
would do if it's with the local authority. They almost certainly will do
Right.
because
Okay.
they're they're not maintained school, but it would be the local authority maintaining that.
Okay.
So
So again, if that happens, it's not kind of it's not they haven't the local authority hasn't done anything wrong in
not
sharing that.
necessarily, but I will say that it's a case by case basis, and
Mm,
like local authorities sometimes are fans of doing things, you know, the policy's this, that's how it is, and
mm,
as I said at the beginning, this is interpretive. It shouldn't be one size fits all because it isn't. So I would say to people, because we get the concerns here a lot of the time where there might be a power dynamic issue between the parents, whether it's
mm,
not an amicable situation,
mm,
um, and you might not want them to know all those details or
yeah.
where you're living, even.
Mm, mm,
You need to make that really clear to the local authority. That's where you probably do need to share a bit more than perhaps you would like to. Not necessarily go into details, but saying, look, there is this situation,
hmm
this, and the important bit really is to say what the effect would be if they did share that. So
Okay. And this is that
sharing,
farm, the farm you were talking about,
this
isn't
is it
it? Yeah.
exactly. So yes, that parent has access to that through the education regulations, but and this is where the interpretation comes in. The local authority should always consider what's in the best interests of the child before doing that. If they know or they suspect someone's told them, and that's where the sharing comes in, that this is going to put them at harm or at
Right.
risk of harm, they really shouldn't then share it, or they should redact some of it, which means to um, remove or otherwise obscure the information coming back so, to make it more anonymous. So it might be, okay, look, we think we can still safely share the written response, but we won't share any of your personal details like your address, etc.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And we'll remove any location
Mhm.
information. Not that we suggest putting that into a written response.
Again, doesn't it? It
But
just comes back to, doesn't it?
yes,
Putting it in
exactly.
the minimum. And I guess you know if you're in that situation of, a separated partner, if if this scenario could come up. So probably be even more cautious in that
Yeah,
situation. Well, it all got a bit grim at the end. So I'm
it
going to ask
did.
you, do you know any data jokes?
Oh, wow, God, you put me on the spot there. No, I think we should ask AI. AI could come up with a good data joke.
Okay, I might add one in. Um, I do you know any cool data facts?
God, blimey, you put me on the spot here, Cheryl. I think I've given away all my cool data facts.
Okay, okay. I've got one. I've got one.
Go
Which is that the Latin word data is the plural of datum, which means a thing given. So there we go. And the first English use of the word data is from the 1640s.
Oh, I'm interested in that one.
Yeah.
Where was that?
Well, of course, Wikipedia. I'm sure there's
No,
nothing wrong with that.
where was it used? It wasn't used
Don't
on
know. I
Wikipedia in the
don't know. We should
1600s.
find out.
We should
Um,
do.
The word data was first used to mean transmissible and storable computer information in 1946, and the expression data processing was first used in 1954. There we go. And just as a little treat for you again, I'm going to show you my data duck, um, which is available to purchase. Although actually, no, I think it's out of stock. I can't, so I can't buy this for you for Christmas, I'm afraid. But here is the data rubber duck with his cat Spot. There we go.
It looks a little bit like a Bond villain with the stroking of the cat.
Bond villain. It's like slicked back hair. It's very creepy. I wouldn't want that at the end of my bath. I would not find that
No,
very
no, it doesn't
soothing.
look as lovable as Data from the show.
No.
It's not.
Okay. He can go now. Bye bye.
Bye, duck. Fuck off.
Yeah. Quite the chat about data. I think that was really helpful though, because I thought I knew quite a bit about data already, and I feel like I learned quite a lot. So thank you
Not
very
just
much.
confused you, so that's good.
Not at all, not at all. No, it was fine. It was good, and this is definitely something that the team are going to appreciate having a good listen to, I think, because we do like to be able to give good quality advice, but we
Absolutely.
will always tag you if we're in doubt.
Oh, please do. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and it's good. It's good to have a listen about this stuff. So, this may be the first of a series of Cheryl and Craig have a chat about something to do with home ed. So we'll have a think about what else we might talk about next time.